I promise that I will try to make all of the videos in the first shot, but this one I messed up like 5 times right from the get-go. This is gonna be it. I'll just think out loud. Hopefully it's going to go right this time. Set, love, responsibility, and liberty. Those are the ideas. That's the title of this channel. The idea goes like this: love is intrinsic to set. That's the important thesis of this project. Responsibility is intrinsic to love. And lastly, responsibility proceeds from liberty. So that's the connection, in case you were wondering. Now, when we think of liberty, we don't think of liberty at the spiritual level too much. And to be honest, I often don't do it either. I'm a libertarian, pretty much, and libertarianism is a political philosophy. I'm also Catholic. Catholicism is a religion, and that concerns the spiritual realm, to put it that way. Libertarianism, properly comprehended, doesn't care about how you live your life. It's not a guide to live your life. It's a framework, a political framework, pretty much. But it's part of me, so this channel is about me. So I'll cover topics on libertarianism from time to time, and I'll try to build bridges, because I'm seeing connections the more I get into all of these topics at the philosophical level. You know, if you look at it from another angle, set, love, responsibility, and liberty, they all have something in common that is at the center of any analysis, and it is the human person. You don't analyze any of these topics at the collective level first. You only analyze all of these topics at the level of the individual first and foremost. His being, his actions, his rights. And there are connections. If you think about it this way, and people have thought about it this way before. I mentioned a lot the philosophy of Pope John Paul II. I've been thinking about the book that I've read a lot, which is Love and Responsibility. And John Paul II approaches the topics of love and responsibility with a personalistic character. That's how he describes it, a personalistic character. He says that sexual ethics cannot be analyzed without understanding the person, as I said, his being, his right, his actions. Actually, that's where I got the idea to say that. It's an idea of John Paul II. It's not mine. But at the same time, it's pretty obvious if you think about it. Was John Paul II concerned about liberty? Of course he was. At the spiritual level, he brings up the fact that human persons were endowed with the powers of self-determination and free will. And from this fact, that from this distinctness of the human person among all beings in the visible world, he goes on to say that this is the basis for the interactions and the relations. It's the presupposition for all relations between persons. and all limits as well. Then he quotes Immanuel Kant and says that a person should not ever be used as a means to an end. So that's sort of the idea of John Paul II. It's a very spiritual understanding of liberty, because it brings God into the equation by asserting that we were endowed with the powers of self-determination and free will, and that not even God may use the human person as a means to an end. God said that the human person will define his own ends. He also said that love is the commitment of freedom. It is a choice, a free choice. And that is part of the value of such a choice. So I hope that conveys a little of how important liberty is to understand sexual ethics. Because then John Paul II says that love is the opposite of using the person, but that's another topic. I don't want to get too much into that, because I want to cover other authors and thinkers. But before I jump into that, even if John Paul II focused on this very, very spiritual analysis, he has another work which I haven't read, which is The Acting Person, or The Person and Act. I haven't found a really good translation, digital translation at least, so I haven't read that work, but I know that in that work he covers a lot of the analysis and substantiates topics on the theme of the dignity of the human person. And if you look up the biography of John Paul II, you realize that he was really important in the 20th century in opposing communism as a political ideology. He condemned any political ideology that would violate the basic dignity of the human person. Now, communism eventually failed incredibly, and it's a thing of the past. But in the 20th century, the battle of ideas was a very fierce battle of ideas on these topics. So there you have it. Eventually we touch politics if we're talking about liberty. Even John Paul II had to engage in that during his lifetime. I was reading today this book that I just got, which is The Libertarian Mind, written by the executive vice president of the Cato Institute, David Bose. And so David Bose, besides covering a lot of things and saying that libertarianism is the pinnacle of political thought, it's a very interesting assertion. If you think of human history, one pattern is clear. We all the time try to approach greater degrees of freedom. It's like a quest for freedom. Human history has been like such a long quest for freedom and understanding and substantiating our inalienable individual rights. But then I found something very interesting, because David Bose said he quoted Saint Thomas Aquinas. Look at that. He quoted and he acknowledged Saint Thomas Aquinas was probably the most important, or one of the most important Catholic philosophers. St. Thomas Aquinas lived like 800 years ago. Now he quoted him like very quickly, but obviously John Paul II quotes St. Thomas Aquinas as well in lower responsibility. But you start seeing connections here. St. Thomas Aquinas, David both acknowledged, tried to propose that 800 years ago it was completely acceptable to rebel against tyrants on the basis of our rights to life and any other individual rights. I think I'm getting lost with my ideas here. Where am I going? Okay, obviously I was getting really lost with my ideas in the last clip, but I figured that the best that I could do is actually quoting textually what David Boaz wrote of St. Thomas Aquinas in his book, The Libertarian Mind. He says, later in the 13th century, St. Thomas Aquinas, who was perhaps the greatest of all Catholic theologians and other philosophers, developed the theological argument. Look at that, a theological argument for limits on royal power. Aquinas wrote, a king who is unfaithful to his duty forfeits his claims to obedience. It is not rebellion to depose him, for he is himself a rebel, whom the nation has a right to put down. But it is better to abridge his power, that he may be unable to abuse it. It's a theological argument for liberty. The point is, liberty is everywhere. That's the point. I guess that's the point. Liberty is everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Liberty is in love too, and sexual ethics, at the spiritual level at least. But it's such an interesting nuance, isn't it? There's something else that I want to read. I'm going to pause this video just because I want to. Okay, so I have it here. What I want to convey is try to think how it is possible to use a theological argument, as St. Thomas Aquinas did, to make the case that we can rebel against a tyrant who is violating our freedoms. But at the same time, it is clear, it is evident that, any argument about any spiritual argument, there's a clear distinction between politics and religion. That's what I also want to convey. So I have here an entry from my diary that is, I imagine an inquisitor sort of like asking me, how come you are a Catholic if you are a libertarian? And so this is sort of like the reply that I imagined, which is, how are you going to stop them? Stop relying on the government to force on men what not even God is forcing them to do. For God endowed man with the powers of self-determination and free will. And who are you to take such divine powers away from them? The role of government shall be first and foremost to protect those powers. That's the field of practical politics, where I will defend your powers of self-determination and free will, as long as you respect the ones of others and mine as well. The role of the Church is to preach the true ends from the revelation, such that man can understand them through his reason and make them his own with his powers of self-determination and free will. That's the field of faith and personal salvation, where I must find happiness in loving God. Jesus came to tell us how to live. Love one another as I have loved you. Jesus did not come to tell us how to run the wicked politics of men and write our imperfect laws. For his law is perfect, and his kingdom is the one of heaven, and will always be above anything man can ever invent on earth. Do your best in the wicked politics and laws of man, but do not dare claim the perfect word of Christ can be reduced to that, for it is above and will always be above. There's more I want to say, but I'm running out of charge.